to this morning's session. At Growthpoint, we've been looking at ESG for a while, and we assess a number of principles which are out there which should be considered when looking at ESG. We used these principles in the last year when we were formalizing our approach. Not all indicators are relevant to all businesses. Each organization needs to determine where they are in the ESG journey in order to determine what is material to them and then apply it appropriately. When we looked at formalizing our strategy, we looked at what the value proposition was for Growthpoint. We looked at future-proofing our assets through utility optimization, making sure that we met compliance requirements as well as the growing investor needs. In order to determine what we disclose, what we prioritize, we review a number of frameworks which are out there. Again, it's an issue of materiality for the business. Not all indicators would be pertinent for each business. And we also got to be realistic about the fact that we can't necessarily meet all recommendations that are out there. In addition to the numerous frameworks which are out there, we are also participating in a number of surveys on ESG, and we use that to guide us in terms of what the various stakeholders are looking for in terms of disclosure, what the it allows us to benchmark ourselves against our peers, and it also informs what the relevant topics are at a point in time. We would be remiss in not identifying the UN SDGs. Of the 17 goals, we've identified six that we believe are pertinent to our business. When we were going through our review process, we found it we were very encouraged by the fact that there are a number of initiatives which are already in place which address these issues. I'll hand over to Graham now.
Hi everyone. So Nazim's already introduced me. Graham Cruikshanks, Head of Sustainability and Utilities. Natalie's already alluded to our carbon neutral 2050 target. And while it's becoming quite typical for large corporates to make a long-term commitment to carbon neutrality, we feel that this is specifically quite ambitious in the South African context. Carbon neutrality is quite difficult to define across the different types of sectors and businesses that target this particular environmental initiative. And what we've done in order to try and make it relevant to our role in the property sector is to use the definition for a net zero carbon building, whereby projects do everything within reasonable technical and financial viability to achieve energy efficiency for a project. The second step is to introduce as much on-site renewable energy for that particular project. For us in South Africa, with the property portfolios that we own, that typically takes the form of rooftop solar PV plants. And then the third step is to procure off-site renewable energy. This is not commonplace in South Africa yet, but it's very likely that it's going to become more so. There's a lot of talk about wheeling through the national grid and being able to procure energy from off-site locations. If you imagine a solar farm in the Northern Cape supplying energy through the national grid to some of our buildings. And the last step is to use carbon offsets, certified carbon certificates to offset the balance of the emissions associated with a particular project or organization. Can I have the next slide, please? Thanks, Natalie. The well-entrenched five-pillar sustainability strategy that has been in place at Growthpoint for a number of years remains extremely relevant. We have always strived to achieve value creation through our sustainability initiatives. One of the foundation components of this sustainability strategy is the way that we manage utilities. Utilities has typically been seen as the collection of energy and water bills and ensuring that those are effectively managed. But in fact, what we're seeing is a rapid growth into the data space, and in particular, the data that's gathered through utilities management, providing us with the information that we need to improve the performance of our assets and to ensure that we're directing our energy efficiency projects in the right way. You can see that another one of those pillars is the renewable energy mix. We anticipate aggressive growth in our portfolio of renewable energy assets, again, largely in the form of rooftop solar on our own properties at this stage. It's taken us about 6 years to reach a 10 megawatt portfolio of renewable energy plants, and that was at the end of the last financial year. At the end of this current financial year, we anticipate to have more than doubled that to approximately 22 megawatts. So we see really aggressive and rapid growth. Our other initiatives include green building measures, which have an extremely diverse and wide range. But I'll talk to that a little bit more. If you could move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So we recognize that, in fact, while the environmental leg of the Growthpoint ESG strategy has moved to a focus on carbon neutrality, there's an extremely wide range of initiatives. They include waste management and water management and efficiencies in those areas, and also the impact that indoor environmental quality has on the people who occupy our buildings. Let's not forget the people in this equation. So indoor environmental quality addresses issues such as air quality, light quality, acoustics, and improves the experience people have in buildings, and thus improves the value of our assets. When we start to look at the range of risks associated with the environmental leg of the ESG strategy, you can see immediately from this chart how carbon emissions emerges as a prominent component, hence our focus on that. When we look at the first two columns, climate-related risk and mitigation, carbon tax has a very immediate and direct impact on our business, and our carbon neutral strategy has a very immediate and direct mitigation response to that. I won't go into the risks too much further, but happy to discuss those later if there's any need to do so. When an organization sets a 30-year target, it's important to break that down into realistic and tangible, viable milestones. So while we have 10-year targets in place, those are guided through the Science-Based Targets program, and we use the Science-Based Targets program as a framework to develop a model to set the right targets. We didn't feel that Science-Based Targets was an appropriate initiative to actually commit to. This has to do with the fact that we report internationally on all of our assets. We would have to report internationally on all of our assets to meet the Science-Based Targets requirements, which is not viable for us, as well as the fact that they're far more geared towards highly developed environments where there's a lot of renewable energy in the grid. We further broke the targets down into a 3 to 7 year category, which aligns well with the investment cycles typically available in the market, particularly if you look at products such as sustainability-linked finance. And then lastly, on annual targets as well, to make sure that we're tracking appropriately along our carbon neutral trajectory. Lastly, just a quick summary on where we got to with our 2020-22 targets. These were widely publicized and set a number of years ago. And we've recognized that we were overly ambitious in some of these, but on track in others. The net zero building certification is a difficult and complicated target to hit, and we've recognized that we need to reassess that timeline, and we've established that we feel we can get to 20 net zero buildings by 2025. Our 20 megawatts of solar energy I've already spoken about. We're confident we're going to exceed that. Recoveries from green lease, we've assessed again and feel that the initial version of the green lease needs to be adapted to a far more customized approach. So we'll have initially fewer revenues, but more appropriate green lease structures, and have thus adjusted the timeline for our 20 million rand recoveries from green lease to 2025. Lastly, the Greenovate project is a partnership between Growthpoint and the Green Building Council of South Africa, where students from property studies and engineering faculties are invited to present innovative sustainability projects to a forum where they're judged and given the opportunity to present to the private sector and to other entities that which may be able to take up the initiatives that they've presented. So it's a translation of academic research into the property sector. We've actually already implemented one of the Green of 8 projects and hope that in the next 12 to 24 months we'll be implementing a second one. Thanks. I'll hand over to Sean.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks, Natalie. Good morning, everyone. I'll focus on our social footprint as Growthpoint. And I think at Growthpoint, the social imperative consists of a key focus on both our employees and our community at large. Am I on mute? Can you guys hear me?
No, you're fine, Sean. I can hear you.
Okay, great. Growthpoint's recent achievement of a level 1 BE score reflects our commitment to the principles of social and economic transformation and empowerment at all levels. And our achievement is also a first in the property industry and demonstrates that Growthpoint's transformation is just not a compliance.
Now you're on mute.
How did that happen? I did not. Okay. In terms of our focus on transformation, it's both an imperative, both for our internal environment through the empowerment of our people and development of our people, but also to our contribution to change and impact in society at large. If we focus on the labor component, which very much is our internal lens. Am I still on mute, guys? Can you hear me? I'm unmuted.
Nope, you're fine. Fine.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
I think there may have been a delay. Don't worry.
In terms of our focus on our labor component, which is really our staff, the environment that we create is an environment where staff have an opportunity to thrive at Growthpoint through ensuring progressive policies, a key focus on diversity and inclusion, and fair staff remuneration. Natalie, if we can just move on to the next slides. The next one, please. Slide 15. Natalie, just to the next two slides.
Sean, it's Lauren. I think there's a delay from that side with the slides coming through. I think if you don't mind just presenting, and we will circulate the presentation afterwards. So
perfect. Lauren, I'll take over. I've got a slide back as well.
Okay, perfect.
Next one, Nazim, that would be great. So in order to execute our organizational strategy, employee training and development is critical. Access to continuous development is available to all staff, and personal development plans are aligned to our performance development plans. I think critical has been that we have also focused on ESG and transformation as two critical performance indicators at an executive level. From a policy perspective and procedures, we ensure a conducive working environment that provides clear guidance to address an array of business issues. And we have select policies that are made publicly available on our website. All our policies are periodically reviewed in order to ensure that we keep abreast of the changes in the business environment. Specific things, elements such as what has taken place during COVID, being able to impart a COVID policy and also a flexible work policy. Next, please. From an engagement perspective, we've conducted an annual employee staff engagement survey in order to provide feedback, a feedback channel for staff. Growthpoint continues to be an employer of choice. Being able to have that two-way channel with our staff becomes important in terms of how we need to address some of the internal challenges. We also offer a comprehensive employee wellness offering and has seen the benefit to staff during the COVID period, with a key focus on prioritizing employee mental and emotional well-being. We also have a health and safety committee in place, which is chaired by our COO. And this committee will ensure compliance with all the regulations and making the work environment a safe place to work from. Also, continuous health and safety training is conducted on our work trainer platform, and incident data is continuously tracked. So if we move on to the tenant focus, I've also ensured that we have a dedicated health and safety officer who reviews our insurable risk for tenants at a building level, and we extensively engage with both our insurers and brokers on our insured risk. When we start unpacking, next slide, please, our broader community social focus, our aim is making a sustainable impact through our corporate social responsibility. And our societal purpose is intrinsically linked to our long-term sustainable impact within the business and within the communities in which we operate. We've also aligned our corporate social responsibility to our organizational purpose and corporate values, and ensure that we have embedded a shared value philosophy in our business. Our 3 core CSI pillars is investment in education, entrepreneurship support, and also staff engagement. Nazim, if we can move on. From an education perspective, we've always known that we needed to take a long-term approach in ensuring that educating the youth in South Africa allows us to have a more productive and a future workforce. And we've taken a strong value chain approach, providing support from early childhood development right up to tertiary scholarships and skills development, creating work readiness for young people. Our various key flagship programs such as Grow Smart focuses on education support in primary school level throughout the Western Cape, Eastern Cape and Limpopo. An internal program which we are very proud of is providing our staff, children with scholarship opportunities. Growthpoint GEMS provides staff earning less than 400,000 per annum a full scholarship at the primary school, high school and tertiary level. But when we start looking out into the broader industry, if we can move on. From a supply chain perspective, 13 years ago, Growthpoint initiated Property Point, which has become an industry initiative working with our peers in order to support small and growing businesses within the property sector. The support of these businesses has become imperative to employment creation and also an opportunity to transform our supply chains. It has extended beyond just the supply chain, as we've seen with our recent engagement or with the recent unrest in South Africa. Local economic development has become quite a critical focus area for South Africa. And from a Growthpoint perspective, we're actually quite proud that we've implemented a local economic development policy with targets in place, ensuring that we are engaging and utilizing services of suppliers at all our local assets. But I think what is also most critical, as the old saying goes, charity begins at home. Staff engagement is a critical project or critical focus for us at Growthpoint through our G2 initiative or Growthpoint Gives. Through G2, each of our employees are able to get 1 day a year in order to either volunteer or engage with an organization of their choice. Certain key themes that has come to light is gender-based violence, being able to provide food security to vulnerable groups, and also to focus on service delivery. Thank you so much. And maybe just to address the question that Nazim has posed in terms of expanding on Property Point and how does it work. Property Point is our focus on enterprise and supplier development. What we basically focus on is working with key industry players. To date, we have Growthpoint as a lead partner. We also work with Attack, Fortress REIT, Perito, PIC, and government through CEDA, and the ability for us to identify key businesses within the property value chains, from your construction businesses right up to your professional service, whether it's quantity surveyors or architects or valuers, providing access to markets to these businesses through engaging procurement or supply chains within the industry, but also providing access to finance through our funding partners, and incubation services throughout the lifespan of the business with Property Point.
So maybe just on the incubation side, can you maybe just give us a practical example of that? Is this kind of a SME and you kind of help them off there to assist with what, managing working capital? You know, what's the type of practical example, just to get an understanding here?
Yeah, so maybe to use the example in one of the businesses that we have supported over the years, NRP Construction. It's headed up by, it's a 100% Black woman-owned business, Puleng, and that has worked within the repairs and maintenance and tenant installation space. Our journey with her has been to be able to identify certain gaps within a business, whether it is competency or technical skills, partner with industry associations, such as Plascon or Balcatex, to be able to embed some of those technical competencies within a business, but also ensuring that she's able to gear a business up for funding as she grows her business. We've been able to partner up with the likes of Nedbank in order to provide a capital injection into her business, and has become part of some key supply chains, including Growthpoint, Attack, and Fortress.
Brilliant. Thank you for the presentation, Natalie, Graham, and Sean. It's time for Q&A. I see we've got a hand up by Mauro, but just a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, you can post it in the chat or raise your hand, Mauro. You can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Morning. Thanks very much, everyone. I just have a question regarding the possibility of tying, you know, some of these goals into sustainability-linked finance and actually, you know, benefiting from that. We've obviously seen the market quite active, and I think, you know, your approach, certainly, as you've mentioned this morning, lends itself quite nicely to that. So I was just wondering sort of the progress you've made on that front and allowing Growthpoint to benefit from all this work from a funding perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Mauro. To date, we have focused on green bond, which is not the same as sustainability-linked finance, and we recognise that green bonds are use of proceeds, whereas sustainability-linked finance is far more performance-focused. We anticipate that in the not too distant future, we will be using the set of targets that that in the last financial year we have reset to access sustainability-linked finance opportunities. Our Treasury is working quite hard to understand which opportunities are best. What we find attractive about sustainability-linked finance is that we're able to use the proceeds as we see fit for the business, as long as we meet our KPIs. Our KPIs are almost certainly going to focus on our carbon neutral two-part strategy. So the energy efficiency component will reduce emissions, and the renewable energy component will obviously provide the additional boost. We do find, though, that there's quite a, I'll be perfectly honest, quite a varied approach to the KPIs, and in some cases the KPIs almost seem to be quite easily achievable. So we'd like to ensure that we fully understood the implications of committing to those KPIs before diving in.
Great, thank you.
Nazim, while I have the floor, you're still on mute, Nazim.
Okay, I'll continue with the governance section. Growthpoint has takes a position where we look to add value through our governance, and we look to maintain high standards of governance practices. This is underpinned by our values and our culture. If we look at the next slide, we would see that we have undertaken quite a lot of activities to try and make sure that we remain abreast of all governance developments, and we do this because we want to make sure that we remain compliant and meet shareholder expectations. Some of the things that we do is obviously meet JSE listed requirements, look at annual reviews of the board, but in this year, for the first time, we actually had our King 4 performance externally reviewed. Skills development and making sure that we have appropriate skills on our board is pertinent, as the board is pivotal to the governance of the organization and provide good insight for the business leaders. We do appreciate the fact that we've got quite an extensive amount of training to undertake for our ESG related issues. When we look over the last year, the next slide will indicate that one of our key focus areas has been ethics. We had in 2019 undertook a ethics survey for the business, and were with the intention of addressing the concerns that may have come out of that. We did realize that due to COVID-19, the operating context has changed. So we decided to redo this survey with this time including both staff and suppliers. And we have just received the results, which are now being communicated to the board. I'm glad to report that we have fared better than most of our corporate peers on a number of issues, but still there is work to be done relating to some of the areas of concern. As soon as that strategy has been finalized, we'll roll it out with all stakeholders concerned. Policy development, which is on the next slide, is not only development but application is pertinent in order for us to retain governance within the organization. This is policies are regularly reviewed and assessed. We are going through an assessment over the next couple of months to look at a gap analysis and to make sure that our policies are aligned with each other and what the organization does. When we, for us in terms of ESG and the way forward, our next slide shows we have realized through our engagement with DFIs that there are gaps that in our systems, and we are looking to work towards addressing these gaps. On the next slide, we have a framework which has been developed, which we're looking to use to apply to our business to address some of these concerns. When we were looking for finance from the IFC of the $18 million, for our healthcare business, we did realize that there's opportunity for us to improve some of the systems that we have in place. We have a dashboard for our environmental information, and we're looking to create something similar for our social elements, just to make sure that we remain abreast of all the work that our CSR and HR teams are busy doing. We've also done quite a lot of work from a risk and opportunity analysis, and recently including climate change on our risk register. We remain aware of risks that are out there, and we'll obviously include them as and when we need to in terms of the risks and opportunities that apply to them. Not all these phases are easy to achieve and will happen over a period of time, but we are confident and we are positive that we can definitely make progress over the next couple of years at the very least. And finally, what we have done over the last year is create a position statement for Growthpoint on ESG, which we believe appropriately addresses and gives pertinence to the importance of ESG within the organization. Thanks.
Sorry, perhaps while we wait for Nazim to reconnect, I'm just going to ask my question. Graham, I think it was you who mentioned this, but I'm interested to explore sort of those wheeling arrangements which you mentioned earlier. Now, I know it's in the early phase that we've had the embedded generation cap lifted, that there are agreements. I mean, how actively have you looked at that? Have you consortiums come to you? Have you put out an RFP? Just just I'm trying to gauge the level of activity in the market, sort of on the back of this new framework, and sort of how far away you are from actually being able to benefit from it. Thank you.
Sure. Mara, at the moment, we're finding that there are many promises being made, but not much delivery, and that happens on the private and public sector side of the fence. So, as you rightly point out, the legislation has changed. We're now able to find ourselves in a situation where we can actually produce, as private power producers, a lot more energy. It's capped at 100 megawatts. We don't have a single property where we could actually produce 100 megawatts off of a rooftop. That's substantial. At the moment, the only active and viable wheeling that we're aware of is through the Eskom grid, so the Eskom connected buildings receiving an Eskom supply. And there are agreements in place where wheeling is taking place at the moment, but there are very few and far between. We've explored potentially entering into a partnership with a private power producer that has a renewable energy plant and supplying energy exclusively to our Eskom connected buildings, of which we have a number, particularly in the industrial and commercial sector. So it's at the moment it's viable through Eskom connected buildings. We've also explored what we could potentially do at municipal level, and although some of the municipalities make wheeling available as a technically viable proposition, the commercial proposition is not attractive. The cost, an administrative cost of wheeling through the grid to a municipally connected building is extremely high. Having said that, City Power in Johannesburg has some quite progressive plans in place, and it's actually likely that City Power, along with City of Cape Town, will be procuring energy from private power producers through buyback agreements. So that's different from wheeling, and it's quite likely that they will enter into wheeling agreements in the near future. So our plans at the moment are to continue with our building by building baseload scaled rooftop solar plant installations, and to ensure that those are designed in a way that they can quite easily be scaled up. We see particular opportunity in the industrial sector, where we have buildings that are extremely well suited to rooftop solar installations, but with very low energy demands. And as soon as we're able to access the grid viably, we will be doing so. There are a handful of situations where energy storage is viable. That's the conversation that Nazim alluded to earlier, and we do explore those there. But energy storage typically doesn't meet commercial viability, only in situations where peak tariffs are exceptionally high and we're able to double up the energy storage for backup power and peak load shaving.
Graham, thank you. Sorry, just one follow-up question.
So Mara, I hope that addresses your questions.
No, thank you. I just have one follow-up. I know, accountants always like to put numbers to everything, but I mean, what practically...
I see Nazim's off the call. He did post a question on the chat just now about how we use utility billing data. So I'll quickly talk to that. I did put something into the chat on that. I mentioned, as part of our 5-pillar strategy within the sustainability value creation proposition, that we see utility billing data as a foundational component. And we've got to the point now where our environmental dashboard, which has a dual purpose, it's partly there to collect information for our reporting cycles on non-financial data, but it's also come into its own as an extremely useful tool to collate and report on the utility billing data that we have access to on a monthly basis. So what we've done is we've converted the collection of data into a dashboard which can be accessed at any time. in order to track properties' energy and water performance, but also we're able to produce reports on a monthly basis where we track buildings against a baseline on their performance over the last 3-year cycle. And we're able to identify where buildings are consuming significantly more than their baseline and forecast, and to either address a particular anomaly in that property or to plan for energy and water efficiency improvement projects. They may take the form of additional metering. The more we know, the more we're able to address the issues. Lighting retrofits, water efficiency and water storage projects, and obviously, of course, the solar projects that we've just spoken about.
Thanks, Graham. Hope I'm
open the
back.
floor for questions now.
Is my sound working?
To Natalie or to Sean or to myself.
We can hear you, Nazim, yes.
Perfect. And Lauren, as you respond there, I've actually got a question that might be more relevant for you. Is ESG becoming a greater part of the investment discussion as you chat to instos?
Okay, so
on a sporadic basis?
if you have no further questions, I know that there's sometimes a follow-up later, which I think happens through Lauren. Happy to respond to those at any time. Should there be any?
Lauren, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Did you get the question?
Yes, I did hear the question. Yes, our engagement has definitely increased with shareholders over the years. I'd say at least in every new investor meeting that we have, and this would typically be with the offshore guys, ESG definitely comes up, and Natalie and I even find ourselves in ESG specific investor meetings where we only cover ESG. So we've definitely seen the volume increase, and I think tied to that are also discussions we're having with our shareholders. We just recently finished our AGM roadshow, and what's been very topical coming out of that meeting, as well as our remuneration roadshow, is the demands from investors for us to please increase our ESG weighting in our remuneration scorecard. So currently, if you look at the STI scorecard, you've got 15% weighted towards non-financial measures. And if you look at the LTI scorecard, you've got 10% weighting towards non-financial measures. So investors have indicated it's sort of anything from 7.5% right up to 25% is a requirement for ESG. 25 would be coming from the global investors. And I think what's become very obvious is that the general sort of JSE Responsible Investment Index, which is typically where we would rate ourselves for the sustainability metric, that the investors would like to see more company-specific measures. And as you can see through our presentation, we definitely do have company-specific measures that we can now start to bring in and incorporate there. So it's very, very topical.
Mauro, apologies, but I think you were asking a follow-up question to Graham's answer. I think you were trying to push for some numbers. I don't know if you're still online.
Yeah, sure. Graham, can you hear me?
I can now. Sorry, I missed that the first time round.
No problem. Graham, sorry, just following on from our previous discussion, as I said, I think accountants like to put numbers to anything. I mean, what practically do you think you could achieve, from wheeling, and sort of, as I said, even if you built out your rooftop capacity and we're able to wheel through the grid, I mean, are we talking sort of 10% of your energy requirement, 20%, 5%? I mean, what would be sort of a nice goal or medium-term target?
So we've actually, and if I look at the bigger picture, we've mapped out targets year on year for the next 5 years. I'd struggle to give those to you off the top of my head, but just to put things into perspective a little bit, we recently fully tenanted a commercial office building in Johannesburg in Rosebank, which is a Green Star rated building to a 5-star standard. It's energy efficient. Its energy consumption is I think it's about 95 kilowatt hours per meter squared per annum. The energy efficiency regulations require 200 kilowatt hours per meter squared per annum. So it's an energy efficient building. And on the rooftop of that building, we supply 20% of the building's energy demand from a solar installation. And so the obvious question there is what happens to the balance, which is where your wheeling agreements come into play. So that gives you a real world example of the percentages as we stand at the moment. We anticipate that we would need to reduce our energy demand on our portfolio steadily over the next 5 to 10 year cycle. I can respond separately on the numbers to you for those that don't have them off the top of my head, if you'd like me to.
No problem, thanks.
Thanks. We've got a question from Nessie Chetty. Can you maybe chat through how this team's KPI related to the ESG factors has been tracking so far year to date? And what do you think you may struggle next year? Linked to that, how much of ESG turnaround liftoff is dependent on municipalities and an improvement in them as well? Municipalities seem to be a drag on some of these initiatives. Maybe we can touch on each one separately. So maybe the KPIs and
sure. So in the environmental leg where I focus, the municipalities have proven to be quite difficult to deal with when it comes to actually achieving the targets we'd like to achieve, particularly on energy generation. I mentioned that earlier. There are some positive signs coming out of the municipalities, however. I think City of Tshwane and City of Joburg have both implemented a green building bylaw policy, which is a voluntary compliance component to which is an add-on to their building regulations. And the City of eThekwini in Durban actually offers an incentive in the form of a rates rebate for Green Star certified buildings. So there are these green buds, let's call them, within the municipalities. But for the most part, our biggest challenge with the municipalities is less to do with ESG and more to do with administration and planning approvals and areas like that. So I wouldn't say that they're a significant drag. There's definitely intent on ESG targets. I would, however, say that on an administrative and management level, the municipalities are in fact a big risk to our actual implementation of projects and ongoing operations.
And then maybe for Natalie and Sean, just how are your KPIs tracking relative to targets?
Nazim, maybe I'll just also comment on that one. I think when you look at the REM from a company perspective, typically when you look at those scorecards, you're only looking obviously at executive management. I think what you have to realize is whatever they are getting at the top filters right down throughout the organization. So I think, as we've said, the ESG component of that will now be much more specific and related to much more company-specific targets, whereas historically it's been about the inclusion in the JSE Responsible Investment Index. So I think in the next year or two, you should start to see that come through more and more as it filters down throughout the organization. I don't know if anyone else from the team wants to add anything else to that.
Yeah, I think maybe also just from an actual, when we're looking at the social context and the social environment in South Africa at the moment, I think more importantly, our engagement with local communities is going to become quite critical to the work that we are doing within the social space. I think we've seen that the levels of community unrest, the levels of community or high unemployment does have a corporate impact, and hence our focus on also rolling out our local economic development policy, ensuring that from a corporate perspective, we are taking a proactive steps in terms of ensuring that we are engaging with the community firstly, that we're listening to the communities and we are taking that feedback and also focusing on driving impact through either job creation, supply chain engagement, and market opportunities. And that directly links back to certain KPIs as it relates to elements of transformation and social impact.
Perfect. Thank you so much. It seems like we run out of time and there are no more questions. So thank you for this very enlightening discussion on ESG. We hope to include it more in the future. And thank you so much, and see you later in the day to the participants, and to Natalie, Sean, and Graham. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nazim. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.